Bertha Lewis, who's to my left.
Yes, to the left.
Not always to my left. Not always to my left. She's seated to my left. I'm very short. Bertha Lewis is a person, she's from Philly, who eventually came to New York, became a community organizer, and then got involved with a group called Acorn like 20, 30 years ago. Rose to be the head of New York Acorn, and then at a point in 2009 or 2008 became the CEO nationally of Acorn, and it was at that time a group of 500,000 people. And it got destroyed while Bertha was the head of it by somebody that nobody heard of in those days, but now we all heard of Breitbart. It was Andrew Breitbart himself who set up a sting and where phony films were made about Acorn organizers not caring about people being prostitutes if they said they were poor and they needed a mortgage. Bertha helped move lots of groups out of the dying Acorn. New York Communities for Change is one of them. People have heard of that group in New York, and they survived all over the country. And Bertha went on to found a group called the Black Institute, and that's what she's been doing since 2010. And the Black Institute is looking to train a new generation of black activists across the United States, and not just black activists, but the activists that come out of the diaspora. She worked with me and Zephyr Teachout on her 2014 campaign, and continues to be an amazing activist in New York State and around the country. Thank you.
So I would like to introduce Ryan Stanton, who is the political director of the Long Island Federation of Labor. And he was instrumental in gathering support for my campaign while I was running for the New York State Assembly successfully, and organizing labor walks and making sure that enough folks that were out in the field were coming back with good information and were successfully reporting back, so that we had good IDs. He has been thinking about and talking about and meeting with union activists and members around the Constitutional Convention, and thinking about what it means for us for the last quite a few weeks, and has some thoughts on that. And I'm very thankful that he's here with us today as well. So thank you to both of you for your perspective. And I have heard across this conversation that's been taking place for several weeks/months that this is one of the more civil dialogues that has been taking place, that it is of inexorable importance to us in society today, in New York particularly, and I expect that is going to maintain in this room as well. Thank you so much. Tracy, how are we moderating, or are we?
However you guys want to handle it, a few words pro, a few words con, questions and discussion
Questions
from
and
the floor.
answers. I think that's great. Should we, ladies first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
I've been waiting all day. I got lost. Here's what I want to say. You want to get with some black folks? Why don't you have meetings where we are? How about that? That would be a nice, good thing. Because we have institutions, we have places to congregate, but y'all never want to come to our neighborhood. Maybe you're uncomfortable. Anyway, just wanted to say that. And I also didn't have a title for what I wanted to say, but I'm going to get with Brother Glenn, and so I'm from the Con because I'm putting my body on the line. Here's why I am for this. We have two chances, two bites at the apple. Every year, we have a legislature that goes into session And you can put this amendment on and put that amendment on and do this and do that. Except that it never happens. And then you have this thing called the Constitutional Convention that comes around every 20 years. And so for me and mine, because I'm in danger every day and my people are in danger every day, and part of white privilege means that you will be all right, even if the system remains the same and the status quo. But black folks, people of color, poor people will not be all right. And so I cannot afford to not use any means necessary to change my fate. It's not a question of either or. It's not a question of a zero-sum game. You just do not give up on an opportunity that you have to push forward. I can't afford to wait another 20 years. I can't. I'm dying every day. I don't know how many of you have read the Constitution. How many actually have read the New York State Constitution? Okay, so and it is not a civil conversation that's been going on about a constitutional convention or a people's convention. It is not civil by any means. Good people can agree, but never should there be a point in which organized labor and so-called progressives look up in scorn upon those of us who say yes and want to take this opportunity and fight. When did we get to a point where progressives, activists, labor organizers didn't want to fight? When did we get like this? So I've got a constitution that I want to change, and I'm going to work like hell to change it. I'm not going to leave it up to someone else, because some people think this is a red state with little blueberries speckled throughout. And some people think this is a light blue state, you know, with little raspberries speckled throughout. Well, guess what? Regardless as to that, I intend to fight to make this a deep, deep, blue-black deep state. We are under siege, ladies and gentlemen. I hear we're scared. Anything could happen. Who knows? Don't open up that Pandora's box. Oh my God. Well, we have to open up the box. We have to. Because here's what I want to do. And based on previous conventions, the last time we got to really change anything fundamentally was over 50 years ago. The conventions that we have had have been a portrait in racism. Okay? Because, 1894. 175 delegates, one woman. No black people, no brown people. In fact, they didn't even consider brown people like a category, even to be discriminated against. In 1938, this is like the time where a whole bunch of folks look at a date and a moment in time. We had 168 delegates. 6 6 were women. Yay! 2, the terrible 2, were African American. Again, 0 brown people, Latino people, or even dark-skinned white people for that matter, because there are some. 67, horrible. Oh, and by the way, 1939, there was a big convention in Madison Square Garden. 20,000 Nazis here in Madison Square Garden. Okay? So don't talk to me about gradual change, because we're in the 21st century, and here we are having Nazis marching openly. In 67, we had 186 delegates. Boy, oh boy, Virginia Slims, 10 women. Ooh. But the black hordes ascended 11 black people and five Hispanics. So that tells you something right then and there. It tells you something about how the Constitution was written and who it was written for. I've been fighting for public schools for 30 years. And people say, oh, well, that's protected, a sound basic education. No, it's not. Read the Constitution. There's only 3 sentences in the Constitution right now, and only one about common schools. The other paragraph is about regents, and then the other paragraph is about the state shall not give up property for religious schools. You want to talk about housing and the fight that we have every single day, especially in the city of New York? Well, Article 18 in this Constitution talks about housing for the poor. And boy, oh boy, the holes that is driven through it, you could go through with a Mack truck, which is why we have the deplorable segregation and unaffordability that we have. And then some of my friends who are progressive say, I want to protect poor people. I really do. I don't want to lose the social welfare protections. Really? Really? Well, read it. Every single day, you have hospitals and institutions to deal with people of mental illness gone, closed. A municipality can tell any of you who have a pension, oh, sorry, I'm broke. And there's nothing to protect you except some contract that we know can be broken. I want to strengthen it and protect it. And guess what? Suffrage and voting. I'm saying this. I don't care if you're incarcerated, and this will make you feel uncomfortable. God damn it, you should be able to vote from your jail cell. Yep. Let's talk about that. Compensation? Oh, we deplore the new Jim Crow, but we do nothing about wrongfully convicted or returning citizens. If they need compensation and they go to the state, it may take years. The brother that was here wrongfully convicted, it took him over 5 years to be compensated for the days taken from his life. You can change this in the Constitution. If you get compensation from the state, you know what the city will say to you? Well, here's a couple pennies because you already got paid by the state. So guess what? Don't get greedy, or else wait another 10 years. Did you know in this Constitution, the labor of prisoners can just be farmed out to make money for the state. And you have no rights over your labor. Why? Because you're a prisoner. Listen, people. If the vote is yes, we will have to mobilize and organize. And all of the legislation by 2019 that Brian Kavanaugh and others and Stephanie has proposed, we can make sure that that is on the menu. If the vote is no, then we're going to have to quadruple our efforts legislatively to make bold changes. So you know what? My life depends on it. I may not have all of the stats I usually do, but then I forget because I'm getting old. You know, this activism mess is like, it can weigh you down. And you get tired. But I want to strengthen our Constitution to make it a bulwark against what is now happening across the country and happening in the White House as we speak. It is a weapon, it is a tool that we have. We should not let it go. We should not be afraid to put our bodies on the line for the things that we believe in. We should be progressive. I intend to run to be a delegate. And I intend to organize in one Senate district after another to identify those 3 people per Senate district and the 15 people, delegates at large. I will work for them, I will elect them. In 2014, as Arthur said, a woman by the name of Zephyr Teachout had the balls to run against Andrew Cuomo. We had no money. We were being threatened every day. And yet we got 35% of the vote statewide. I would say having, nonpartisan primaries is the way to go. I say vote yes, because the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. Thank you. Don't be scared.
I'm a little bit. So just real quick, I want to open up with a couple questions. Forgive me. My name is Ryan Stanton. I'm from the Long Island Federation of Labor. For those that aren't familiar, but might be familiar with the AFL-CIO, it's the Central Labor Council on Long Island. We're an arm of the AFL-CIO. But I want to open with a couple of questions. Who here has heard of the Constitutional Convention?
I think everybody.
Okay. Everybody in this room. But if you step foot in another room, not that many hands are going up, right? And in February of this year, Sienna did a poll. 70% of the sampling indicated they would support a constitutional convention. At the close of that poll, they were asked, how much, if at all, do you know about the constitutional convention? And 70% of the respondents acknowledged they knew nothing about a constitutional convention. Now, April, that same poll was done. And 60% of respondents supported it. 59% acknowledged that they knew nothing about it. Now, maybe I'm a little bit cynical. And I think a handful of us in this room might share that trait. The general public has no idea what's going on and doesn't care to know what's going on. They're more concerned about, is there a roof over my head? Is there food on the table? And I think every person in this room agrees that those are important things. I think the discussion today has also been really important in acknowledging that I woke up a white man today, and I get a lot of power and privilege for that. And just because I have a microphone, I think I should acknowledge that I woke up a white man today, and because of that, I have power and privilege. And there are plenty of rooms that I'm going to step foot in, and I'm going to continue to say that. And that's absolutely important. And I can't come at this discussion from a black perspective because I woke up a white man today. So I'm not going to try to. But what I am going to say is I can come at this from a labor perspective. And I can talk about the discussion that I have with working families, union and non-union, all the time. And I don't know if Kenneth is still in the room, but earlier he said he's not a union member and he doesn't have a pension. I say let's get him one.
Yes.
1 in 4 New Yorkers is a union member. That's 25% of our population is a union member. We're number 1 in the country. Labor doesn't have a glorious history when it comes to the black issue, and I'm the first to acknowledge that. But I opened the way I did because I want to make it abundantly clear that, and I can only speak for Long Island, that has changed, that will continue to change, and we will continue to move in the direction where systemic racism is part of the conversation, is something that we'll look to address. We're here to talk about a constitutional convention, and there are a lot of protections in our Constitution for working people. And any good union negotiator knows that when you go to the negotiating table, you don't put things back on the table that you've already negotiated. We don't need to rehash arguments had. What we do need to do is make changes to those amendments or to the language or to a number of items in that Constitution that absolutely need to change. It's not perfect. And we've done that in New York over 200 times. We have 200 amendments to the Constitution. A lot of you probably know that, right? I have not once stepped foot in a room where every hand went up because they were familiar with this topic. So I'm probably saying something you know. And I don't know, how many of you are opposed to a constitutional convention? Okay, how many of you support a constitutional convention?
Still not sure.
And how many of you still are undecided? Good. So I want to persuade those that are undecided and that are open to having this convention. But Bertha opened with, this hasn't been a civil discussion, and I assure you that I want to be as civil as possible in this discussion, and that won't change today, tomorrow, or till November 8th. But I also want to add that on November 8th, if I wake up and I lost this debate and it passes, I support you as running to be a delegate, and I support anyone that's going to champion the causes that a lot of us share in this room. So I'm not here to fearmonger. I'm not here to tell you this is going to get taken away from you and you should be scared. I'm here to say I believe in the same endgame and the same goals, but I just believe there's a different way to go about it, a better strategy. And it was said earlier that in other countries, people march on the Capitol. And here, well, go vote in November. I haven't seen enough people march on the Capitol here in New York State to believe that I'm going to wake up in 2019 and we're going to have enough people marching on the Capitol to put everything that's valuable at stake. But what I do know is if we have enough people in 2019 to march on the Capitol to make the changes that we're talking about here today, that we believe need to be reality, and stop being a discussion in a laboratory or a classroom in Queens, and need to be policy and need to be the systems that we live by, well then, let's do it. I'll march with you, and let's force our elected officials. Let's force the amendment process forward. Now, who supports gambling? A handful of you, right? Whether you support it or not, whether you support it or not, whether you support it or not, we as a voting public got to decide that that's no longer part of our Constitution. That's no longer barred here in New York State. You get to do it. This November, there's a second ballot referendum. Who believes that elected officials that have abused their power and are convicted of a felony need to get their pension taken away? I better see every hand go up out. You get to vote on that. Third question on the back of the ballot relates to the timber industry and the Adirondacks and development. Now, we're told that we don't need to be scared, and I'm not saying you need to be scared. I'm just saying we need to be smart about how we're going to tackle these challenges and these issues, and I'm a partner in that fight. The Adirondacks exist because of the Forever Wild provisions. Now, a lot of people know that, but how many people know how that came about, why that's in our Constitution? Please. Do you have, Bertha?
In fact, the conservation part of the Constitution is longer than any other section of the Constitution. And part of the reason for this was the legislature and the governor that we had at that time, and folks trying to come in and encroach on land. So we were very, very conscious in 38 about making sure that we had wildlife preserved. But you still have provisions in the conservation part of the Constitution that allow for folks to actually take public land and then sort of substitute it somewhere else. So I would like to strengthen that if I were having a convention.
The reason I bring that up is we think about the Forever Wild provisions, and it's true that the legislature and the governor were supportive, but does anyone know why they were supportive? Because the insurance industry was scared what would happen if New York City burns down. I'm going to say that again. The insurance industry is the reason we have Forever Wild provisions, not because we had strong environmental groups, not because movements of people across the state decided that this is something good, and just because it's inherently good, we should have it. It's because corporate interests supported it. Again, I'm going to close with this. I support a lot of the changes that are being recommended in terms of the discussion that's happening around this room. And you have an ally and a partner in me. But I need to stress, and I'll leave you with a question, how can we have faith that the delegates are going to have the public interest at heart?
Thank you, Bertha. Thank you, Brian. We have time for a couple of questions. First hand I saw.
Speaking to the last remark that you made about how can we be sure that the delegates are going to have the public's interest at heart, can you explain what the process is by which a person can become a delegate? And just to cut to the chase, is this a free and open process, or is this a process by which people who already have an undue influence and great access to power have a leg up on the rest of us when it comes to becoming a delegate?
Right, so the process by which people become delegates is we have X number of Senate districts across the state.
Microphone.
So the process by which folks become delegates is we have X number of Senate districts across the state for every 63, which ultimately becomes 204 delegates in today's convention delegate count. And so for each district, there are 3 delegates to be elected.
Plus 15 states.
And 15 at large. And so in order to become a delegate, the number of petition signatures you need to acquire, or I thought it was 1,500,
I heard 1,000.
then it's 1,000. Regardless, and perhaps my number, I ran 20 miles this morning, so getting up and down, and my head's not where it should be. I'm not as sharp as I should be. But no, excuse me. You have to get 1,000 signatures. But what does that really mean? It really means you have to get 3,000 signatures because there's an entire industry in this state built around invalidating signatures. How does that happen? Well, people with power and money make an income and want to invalidate signatures because people that run the system want to have their pick as to who the delegate is. Now, once you are successful in acquiring these arguably 2,500 signatures, right? That's realistic in pragmatic terms. When you run for office, you double whatever the requirement is. You then have to run for office. Now, when do you run for office? You run for office in 2018. Who's running for office in 2018? The Assembly and the Senate. So, and the governor and Comptroller DiNapoli and Attorney General Schneiderman, and Congress. All right, so who's going to be out collecting petition signatures anyway? And I have the blessing of growing up on Long Island where we don't settle our elections in September generally. It's competitive in November, and so there's going to be a lot of folks collecting petition signatures and focused and then campaigning for the general election. So again, it's running for office. And this is a post-Citizens United world. Apparently, corporations spending money is considered speech. And so we'd be naive to think that as part of the campaigning and election process to become a delegate, you don't have to campaign like you're campaigning for office. That's the process.
Let Bertha say something though.
So the question was, Ryan's last question was, how can you be sure that the delegates are going to be like halfway decent? And he's right. And it is hard because you have Senate districts. Senate lines are drawn and they get drawn to be certain people's advantages. My problem is this. This comes every 20 years. And we haven't been doing a damn thing to organize around this and get ready to use it. And so, if the vote is yes, then I start running in 2018. I start running on November 8th, November 9th. That's when my campaign starts, and that's when, in every Senate district, our coalition begins to go after those that we think are in unions or in progressive groups or in community groups, yes, to be able to get the number of signatures that they need to get on the ballot in 2018. And then, if you get elected in 2018, then you have a year to prepare your roles and what you do for 2019 for the convention and what it is that you want to amend or leave alone or strengthen or add that's brand new. So my question is, as Ryan had said, if the question is how are the delegates going to be honest, halfway decent, my question is this. If there is no, if you say no, don't do a convention, then what?
Same old
then what are
same.
we doing? Do we have the status quo? Do we at least try to fight back? Do we at least try to put together policies and legislations that we will want? Because we're gonna have to battle the legislature, because again, there's two ways to do this: convention and the legislature. So, to me, I can't answer the question of what happens next, because I cannot stand the status quo. I get a chance to run. I get a chance to organize other folks to run. I think we can do it. As you said, steadily, we made it steadily more diverse, and we've learned from the 38 convention and the 67 convention. And yes, there's money. It is flowing right now. However, I choose to run and recruit and to train and to get out the vote for what I believe will be folks who will do the right thing.
Arthur, I know you wanted to ask something.
I want to talk about this question of process, because if there is a yes vote on November 7th, right? On November 8th, and I hope NIPAN will be in the center of this effort. And I know Bill Samuels, who I work with also, and Effective New York, and the PAC that he has, will try to get together all the progressive forces in the state and come up with a program, right? A program, not just, we'll hope to do the best thing in 2019. A program. Change the laws to provide for pensions for all. Change the laws to provide for an enforceable right to public education. Whatever it is. Ban fracking. Whatever we want to come up with. Equal rights for women. Equal rights for gay people. None of that's in the Constitution. Come up with a platform, and then we unite around delegates who will have to run first in the Democratic primary. Because we're not going to run as independents. Because the eventual ballot will have Republican candidates, Democratic candidates, conservative candidates, etc. Our people will run in the Democratic primary. It may be that same primary where we're taking on Andrew Cuomo. It may be that same primary where we're taking on some of the IDC people. So it'll be very complicated, but it'll be an effort around a platform. That's the vision we've talked about here in NIPAN. Because we have differences of opinion, so we decided we'll wait till November 8th. But after November 8th, we went through this with Bernie. We had a slate of 175 people around the state, and we picked people, we chose people based on their activism and their campaign, and combined with the program and a candidate and people's activism, we were able to elect 42 to 45% of the delegates in the state. And then there's statewide delegates. There's 15 people elected statewide. And that same fight can go on there. So that's going to be the focus of it. And it may be that the money goes into electing some establishment Democrats, and we put our efforts, hopefully with the union movement, into electing people who support a program. So that's what I think is going to happen. I also want to the latest poll, the Siena poll, has some really interesting information. So it asks who's going to vote if you're going to vote on the Democratic, for a constitutional convention. Now, it shows yeses ahead. This is October 2nd, so it's pretty current. 44% yes, 39% no. But Republicans, 54% yes, 36% no. Democrats, 45% yes, 36% no. Black, 53% yes, 25% no. Latino, 64% yes, 23% no. 18 to 34, 66% yes, 22% no. We have to think about, just like I said before, where do we put our cards when we as chapters, because we're leaving it up to the chapters, where do we put our cards when we decide what our position is going to be and who we're going to align with on November 7th?
All right. We got time for one more question. Todd.
I just want to make a comment about Archer's comparison to the Democratic primary in April 26th. number of delegates awarded in each congressional district was proportional to the vote for the two people. So there was an automatic transfer of, you know, if Bernie got 43%, he got 50% of the delegates in that on that slate, and then which of those 6 Bernie delegates, you know, which 3 got it? It was just an intramural fight. In the Constitutional Convention delegate selection, there's not going to be next to each person's name parentheses, non-establishment, anti-establishment or progressive or anything. It's just going to be people's names. We have, many of us have run for delegate in the Democratic Convention. We have some electoral history, but we're not very well known. Who is known? City council members, members of the state legislature. Those names are out there. They're going to be running for re-election. Not just, you know, they may be running for Constitutional Convention in addition to running for re-election to their positions. So I don't think you can compare running for a Democratic delegates, you know, to the convention to running for a Constitutional Convention.
Real quick, I just want to add something
Real quick, and then we gotta
Yeah, I know.
wrap.
Also, you know, what a lot of people have just mentioned is you're questioning whether you can trust delegates or not. But you can't trust your politicians now. So that's an issue. And 2, when your politicians make decisions, you have no oversight. In this process, you still have to ratify the decisions they make. So you still get to go back to the ballot and say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't. There's a lot more oversight you have with the delegates than you do with your elected officials. So this is a safer process of getting things done than a safer and quicker process.
Can we ask a question about that?
Okay, we really gotta wrap up.
When
hand up a long
when
time.
it's ratified,
Yes.
is that item by item?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna call, so,
No,
like I said, we gotta
Depends on how
wrap
they
up
do it.
this.
Depends on how they do it.
He had his hand up a long time.
What you said. They could be,
Order,
they could
sorry, yesterday was Robert's rules, today is chat. Christine.
I did
Still
just want
have
to
a-
say,
This is dividing.
not necessarily to the Constitutional Convention, which as a union member, I am opposed to the Constitutional Convention, but that's not what I want to address my remarks to. As far as the status quo and going forward. And what I want to say is that my election, I think, proves that in a district as red as mine, as many obstacles as I faced, if I can win,
And you
the
did.
support that I was able to amass with the support of NIPAN, with the support of labor, with the support of the Working Families Party, with the support of huge coalition that I spoke about this morning, that we can elect more progressives to the state legislature, that we can split the state senate, that we can move a progressive agenda forward in 2018 and 2019. Forward from here, regardless of whether we have or we don't have a constitutional convention, and I think there's hope. So I.